What is going on, guys? My name is Tim Ruswick, and today we're talking about something that I don't usually touch on. I've gotten a lot of comments lately that I touch on a lot of the same subjects, and I repeat myself a lot, and that is very true. I'm going to continue to do that because the things that I talk about are very important to me, especially finishing a game, not procrastinating, getting shit done. That's all stuff I'm going to continue to cover because that is stuff that is really important. But today we're talking about testing games. Now, you've heard me talk in the past about getting feedback for games, constantly iterating, talking to your players, communicating, all that stuff. But testing is a little bit different. And I want to go into some of the caveats of how you test and how it all works and what you should do really to make a good game. So I think this is best described on something that I do with my game, and I want to kind of point out the differences between something like feedback and something like testing. So for feedback, I think it really comes into play earlier on in the game. Definitely feedback is part of the whole process, and you want to listen to feedback that you get from people to help make a better game. But it's especially important in the early stages of your game when you're developing the prototype, when you're really figuring out what the game is, when you're designing the mechanics. The feedback of people is so critical in those beginning times because that shapes how the game turns out. Now, testing, on the other hand, usually takes place at the end of the game cycle. And the core thing that you're trying to achieve with testing is you're trying to make sure that there are no game-breaking bugs, that there are no exploits, that there are no mechanics that are broken in a way that can interfere with the experience at all. And I think it's a lot of people get this confused, getting feedback or testing the game. They get them confused as the same thing, and they're not the same thing. And why it's important is because testing at the end of your dev cycle, and not necessarily end, but like the second half or the second or the fourth quarter kind of thing, you are going to run into a lot of little issues. There's a lot of things that are going to not work correctly. There's a lot of things that are going to even go under the radar and not work as intended. And you're not going to be able to figure that out. You're not going to know that until you have other people test for you. In the game industry, they call this QA, or quality assurance, and there are companies that do this specifically. You could pay them, and they actually run through your game, and they test it out on multiple devices. There are several automated ways of testing as well, but testing is really important because a lot of people get scared of having other people test and look for bugs, right? Like they might break the code. But testing doesn't break your code. It breaks your illusions about the code. It breaks the things that you think work but don't really work. It just brings them to light. It doesn't actually break anything that you built. It just shows you how ineffective you were at building it. And, from a perspective of self-esteem, sometimes it's a little scary to have people go through and intentionally try and break your game. But it's really important from a technical, just software perspective of building a game. There are going to be a lot of little things that are going to go wrong. If you watched my live stream the other day, dude, there's so many things that went wrong. And I expected none of them. I expected to get on stream, finish the game, click publish, and get off. No, we had literally more than half of the stream was random ass issues that popped up. And I have a whole video about that. I talked about that yesterday. But testing is really important. User testing, not your testing is important too, but you got to get other people to test the game. And testing is usually better done by people that are good at testing. And this is one of the core differences of feedback and testing. Feedback is usually better from your target audience. Testing is usually better from game developers. Having other developers actually play your game actually is more effective in testing because they do weird shit, right? Like they'll be like, oh, this, I've never seen this kind of swing code before. I'm going to do some weird stuff and see if I can break it. Like, developers think like that, right? So sometimes it helps. I mean, outside of a actual quality assurance team, I think developers are your next best bet in having them test. And I think it's important that you do those things separately, because feedback on the actual game, on the mechanics, on the story, on the experience, and testing of the technical software, of the technical creation of the thing that you built, I think are two separate things. And they're both important. They both play a role, but I think it's just important to keep them in mind, the differences, and make sure that you have testing. A lot of people think that they're testing their game, but in reality, they're just getting feedback. And the bigger, the more complex the game is, the more important this is. Like, this testing is ridiculously important, even on like little mobile games, right? Like, there are all kinds of little issues that can come up on like single mechanic mobile games. But when you're talking about like a full scale platformer with like a single player campaign, or even like something like an RPG or something bigger than that, like, dude, you got to be testing the shit out of that. You got to make sure that everything is working as intended. And you can test it in chunks too. This is another tip that a lot of people I see skipping over this. You can test your code in chunks. So if you're building an RPG, for example, and there's a dialogue system, you can have someone literally like test every piece of the dialogue system. You can have them test it all out, and like all little pieces, try all the different things, try doing yes, no, yes, weird combinations. Try like opening a dialogue system and then closing it and going do something else and then opening again. Like, you know, like all the weird stuff that testers usually find that can break things. And you could test it in chunks and then systematically have a bunch of chunks that are tested. That's great for testing individual pieces, but here's the thing too. You also have to test the whole. And now you're going to think, okay, if I have to test the whole, then it's just a waste of time to test the chunks. No, it's not, because you can isolate issues that may come off in the whole as completely something you have no idea where it came from, where the bug is. Whereas if you test the individual system, you can find issues early on, fix those issues while they're isolated to a code block, and then you can fix them. And then when you're testing the whole, the issues that you're finding are usually compatibility issues between systems. So if you're writing a dialogue system and you're writing a 3D world system, and then you put those things together, if you've tested the chunks correctly, you've fixed all the individual issues with each chunk. When you put them together, you're testing the issues of the compatibility between the two. And usually it's just easier to figure out where the bugs come from and where the issues come from. So, I mean, that's all I got for today. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of testing, quality assurance type of testing, technical software testing, because that stuff is really, really important. It's different from feedback. So if you're getting feedback, that's great, but you also need to test the technical software building stuff of your game. So I hope that helped. If you've had experiences with where testers found something weird that you didn't expect them to find, leave it below. I would love to hear from you. I know I have. I've found so many issues, random ass issues with testing that I never thought I would have. So leave them below. Leave me a comment. I love to have a discussion with you guys as always. But once again, I'm Tim Roswick. I'll see you tomorrow.